Welcome to Semantics and Pragmatics. Okay, so now we've learned our phonemes. We've moved those phonemes together into words for morphology, and then we've taken those words and we've started to make structures with our phrases and our sentences. But what does it all mean? So semantics is the study of meaning in language. So lexical semantics is the study of word meanings, and compositional semantics is the study of phrasal meanings. And then one step beyond that, not just what does it mean, but how do we use it? So pragmatics is the study of language use in context. So different expressions we have to be very aware of when we're working with our English language learners. So compositional expressions are multi-word expressions, and they're predictable from their individual word meaning. So they have a literal meaning. Pat and Jamie are 2 peas in a pod. You are eating green peas, and you have named 2 of them Pat and Jamie. Then we have idiomatic expressions, and these are hard. These are hard for little kids. These are hard for English language learners, and we use a lot of them. I would almost challenge you one day this week to keep a piece of paper with you, and every time you use an idiom, mark it down. And maybe make another column, and every time you hear somebody else use one, mark it down. And then think about being an English learner and try and figure that out. So Pat and Jamie are 2 peas in a pod. How would anyone ever assume that that means that they're best friends? So you're going to need to provide lots of examples and explicit explanations when we're talking about idioms. So when we look at words, we have different meaning relationships. So we have synonyms. 2 words are synonymous if they have the same reference. So couch and sofa, quick and rapid, groundhog and woodchuck. Hyponymy, this is where we have kind of a hierarchy relationship. So a hypernym is a more broad term of a hyponym. So a vehicle is a hypernym of a tow truck. So in the hierarchies of vehicles, tow truck comes below. Dog is a hypernym of poodle. So it's one step up. It's more broad. Then hyponyms are more specifics of hypernyms. So a tow truck is the hyponym of a vehicle. A poodle is the hyponym of a dog. Then we have sister terms. They're equivalent, and they come under the same hypernym. So a pug is the sister term of a poodle. A convertible is the sister term of a tow truck. They both fall under, they're both hyponyms of the hypernym vehicle. And then we have antonyms. So when we look at complementary antonyms, nothing in the world can be part of X's reference or Y's reference. So married, unmarried. There's no gray middle ground. Existent, non-existent. Alive, dead. Win, lose. One or the other. Nothing can cross over. Then we have gradable antonyms, which are still opposites, but there's a middle ground. So wet and dry. You could be damp. Old and young. You're middle-aged. Love and hate. You're feeling different. So there's that middle ground. They're still opposites. Then we have reverse antonyms. So these suggest movements, and one word undoes the other. So left, right. If you're moving right and then you're moving left, you're undoing what you'd already done. Inside, outside. Expand, contract. Not contrast, sorry. Converse antonyms are 2 opposing points of view that require each other to exist. So you have a borrower and a lender. They're opposing points of view, but you can't just have a borrower if you don't ever have a lender. It can't exist. Employee, employer. You can't be an employee of nothing. Over, under, send, receive. So those are converse antonyms. Didactic words. These are words and phrases that we use in sentences that cannot be fully understood without additional contextual information. Could you do it for her? You understood what I'm asking you. You get that I'm asking you to do something for her, but you don't know what I'm asking you to do, and you don't know who her is. So think about that for our English language learners as well. If somebody uses a phrase like this, they need more explicit information. Do what for whom? Then we have felicitous versus infelicitous uses of language. So felicitous utterance, it's situationally appropriate, it's relevant to the context in which it's uttered. So what do you do for a living? I'm a professor. An infelicitous utterance, it's inappropriate in some way. So we use the pound symbol, sharp, hashtag, whatever you would like to call it, and it demonstrates the infelicitous utterance. So what do you do for a living? I have a job. What do you do for a living? I love the color purple too. Those are inappropriate. I have a job is inappropriate. It's not giving you enough information. They're asking more than that. and I love the color purple too makes absolutely no sense. So generally, when you're giving an inappropriate response, you're violating one of Grice's maxims. So we have the maxim of quality. Don't say what you believe to be false. And don't say that for which you lack adequate evidence. So if somebody said, what do you do for a living? And I said, I'm an engineer, I'm violating the maxim of quality. I'm saying what I know is false. The maxim of relevance means you have to be relevant when you're answering. So if somebody says, what do you do for a living? And I say, I love the color purple too, I'm violating the maxim of relevance. Maxim of quantity. Make your contribution as informative as required. Don't make your contribution more informative than required. We all know somebody in our day-to-day lives that gives us a lot more information than required. How was your weekend? And they give us the blow by blow. That's too informative, and it makes you feel almost awkward. You know it's inappropriate in some way. It's not following our maxims. So, what do you do for a living? And you say, I have a job. I violated the maxim of quantity. I wasn't as informative as was required by the question. But if somebody says, what do you do for a living? And I say, well, I'm an adjunct professor, and I teach 2 courses at SUNY Geneseo. I spend, this many hours a week working on the coursework, and I have this many students. That's more information than is required. And then the maxim of manners. So avoid obscurity in your expression. Don't use words or phrases that are hard to understand. Avoid ambiguity. Be brief. Be orderly. So what do you do for a living? I teach. That kind of could be okay in terms of answering, but it might get a little bit into the ambiguity. Who do you teach? Where do you teach? What ages do you teach? What content do you teach? So that goes a little bit into quantity as well. So when we're using language in context in our pragmatics, we do certain common speech acts. So the first is assertion, where we're conveying information. Then we also question, we're eliciting information. When we request something using our language, we're eliciting action or information. We can order someone, and that's more firm than a request. That's demanding action. Promise, where we're committing the speaker to an action. And then we can also threat. It's committing the speaker to an action that the hearer does not want. So these are different things we can do with our language. So performative speech acts, by saying the phrase, you have done what you are saying. So if I'm saying the phrase, I am running, that's not a performative speech act, because I also have to move my body to run. If I say, I pronounce you husband and wife, the fact that I said I pronounce you husband and wife, therefore pronounced you husband and wife. You're now husband and wife. My saying that speech act performed the speech act. So I request that you scratch my nose. I requested it. Therefore, I have done it. I said I request, and then I made the request. So then we also have direct and indirect speech acts. So direct form or function in a direct and literal manner. Americans tend to fall much more into the direct speech acts categories. So, for example, take out the garbage. You're talking to your kids, you say, take out the garbage. Then an indirect, we use one of the felicity conditions, and we're not completely direct or literal. A lot of other cultures fall into this indirect speech act. They would consider it rude to say to somebody, even your kid, take out the garbage. So they might say something along the lines of, the garbage hasn't been taken out yet. You're saying it, you're not asking, you're not requesting, you're not performing a direct speech act, but you're hoping that the hearer will take up the information that you've given, realize that you hope you're taking the garbage out, and then they'll do it. I can think of many a disagreement in communication that happens due to indirect speech acts. So you also have to keep this in mind when we're talking to students. When we're in American culture, we're much more direct. Students might come from a culture that's much more indirect. So if they're trying to explain to you why they didn't do their homework, they might be more indirect, and you're thinking, oh, they're giving me the runaround. No, this just might be how they use language. So then we also have types of sentences in speech acts. And so we have declarative. He is cooking the chicken. That's a direct, declarative speech act. I would love to know who is cooking the chicken. That's still declarative, but it's indirect. Then interrogative, is he cooking the chicken? So I'm questioning, but I'm still direct. Who might have the time to cook the chicken? I'm asking, but it's still indirect. And then imperative, these tend to be much more direct. It's hard to think of an indirect imperative. Cook the chicken. So here's some different practice problems on the different topics we just discussed. Try them out and then get to work on your practice problems for this week because it's our last set of the linguistic structure practice problems. So I'm sure you are excited to be finishing this up and to show me everything you've learned on the exam next week, and then also move on to our broader application of linguistics that we're going to start after this and round out our class. Let me know if you have any questions.